Hi! I'm recording this episode at the same time of In the Event This Doesn't Fall Apart episode. So I am actually reading the same things that I mentioned in that episode. Trials of Apollo, When the Stars Are Scattered, Witch Boy, and I just finished Book Lovers. So yeah, there's nothing really new to update on that front. Probably for the best that I don't update you on books though, because what we're reading I fear is gonna be pretty long. Much longer than In the Event This Doesn't Fall Apart. What you are looking for is In the Library by Michiko Aoyama. So I'm a big fan of both this book and of the series Before the Coffee Gets Cold. That's probably the first or second book I finished this year, which it's January 16th at the moment. Tales from the Cafe. Basically, both these books are set up in very similar ways. Both What Are You Looking For is in the Library and Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I highly recommend, so good, along with this book too. But I'm in the middle of reading the series and I just finished the second book in the series, Tales from the Cafe. I'm trying to space it out because I finished that one really quick. But basically, it surrounds the idea of there's this time traveling cafe, but when you go there, you can only go back in time if there's certain rules about it. So you can only go back in time if the person has gone to the cafe, because you can only go back to the moment that they were at the cafe, along other things. But it's really good, and it's also by a Japanese author. And this book is pretty good too. It surrounds, both of them are just, that book is like a bunch of different people going back in time to either see people, mostly just see people. So the first story surrounds this girl who needs to go back in time because she's really worried and anxious that she won't get to marry the guy that she wants to because he just moved halfway across the world. But this book also has short stories. And I love both these books mostly because they surround this idea of humanity and human nature. And I feel like it's really telling that we are the only animals that feel as deeply as we do. I love my dog, I do, but she is an animal despite how loyal she is. So I feel like human nature and our ability to write about human nature and getting to read about it is such a unique way to display art form, because it's very, I guess, giving to the rest of the world. So I wanted to read an excerpt from What You Were Looking For is in the Library. And I chosen, it's a bunch of just short stories, so no matter what you read, but I'm not going to spoil the ending of any of them because we don't have time. It's really good though. Definitely recommend. If you can read it, definitely do. But it follows a lot of different people. I think the first one is about this young girl, which I really related to because I'm also a young girl. Basically, she's 20 something and she feels like she isn't going anywhere in life because she's working at a fashion store, and then she talks a little bit to this woman who is also working at the fashion store but is much better than she is, and it's okay, sometimes you just gotta make the best of what you can. And each of them has a different type of theme and stuff like that. So this one I chose because it's kind of, both these books together inspired my written piece that I'm going to talk about. And I kind of took the name a little bit. I was like, What You're Looking For is in a Cafe. Because my actual job and what I do for work is being a barista and serving coffee to people. And I can't imagine myself ever not doing a job where I interact with people, because most of the time, a large portion of the time, I love talking to people and I love interacting with them and I love getting to know their stories. And over the years, I've compiled a lot of stories. None of the stories I'm sharing are really true. None of the stuff that I wrote down is like fact. It's all fiction. But it's inspired by the people I've gotten to see at work and the people who inspire not just this story, but the stories I tell others and the crazy stories I have about work, because you see a lot of people when you work in a cafe. And I feel like on another note, you see a lot of people when you work in a library. And both of those are on different spectrums of public service. But I feel like this book just really highlighted librarians as public service people. So this one follows a newly mom who is also a career woman. So it's kind of in the middle of it, but I'm not going to read too much. If I could stop saying that would be amazing. All right. Fatuba skipped along the sidewalk beside me with her hand in mine, her tiny head covered with a straw hat, bobbing along beside me. Fushan wears socks, she says, looking happily at me. I smiled. Sogs. She's talking about her favorite socks with cats on them. She's so cute when she says this, even if I do say so myself. We passed by the school front gate and followed the perimeter fence and around until reaching a signboard with an arrow and the words "Community House this way." That pointed us down a narrow street to a solid-looking white building. At reception, I wrote our names, purpose of visit, and time of arrival in a log on the front desk, and we went in. The library was on the ground floor at the rear of the building. When we entered, I immediately noted the kids' space on the right at the back. Low bookshelves enclosed an area covered by a soft rubber floor mat, set with tiny tables that had rounded corners. To my relief, nobody else was there. Fatuba and I removed our shoes and sat down. It was soothing to be surrounded by picture books, and I pulled out several at random that caught my eye. I ran my eyes over the names of the publishing companies. Sky Sounds, Maple, Star Clouds. Children's publishing companies have such lovely, warm names. Fatuba began peeling off her socks. Why, when just a short time before she had been so happy to be wearing them. Fushan, are you hot? Barefoot Jerup. Barefoot Jerup? I can interpret most things, Fatuba says, but some defeat me. She began wandering around the shelves. I rolled up her socks and stored them in my voluminous bag. Suddenly, a young woman with a ponytail bobbed up over the shelves to peer at us. Maybe she means Jerup? She wore a navy blue apron that looked like a staff uniform and was holding several books. The name tag hanging from her neck read, Nozomi Moriyanaga. It's a popular series called Barefoot Jerup, a picture book about a centipede, Nozomi said, with a smile as fresh as new green buds. Ew, a centipede? Nozomi giggled as she removed her shoes and entered the space. She placed the books on one of the low tables, then deftly extracted a volume from the shelves and handed it to Fatuba. Jerup, Fatuba whooped and jumped on it. She must have known it from daycare. When she opened the book, I saw a picture of a centipede trying to put shoes on its numerous feet. Half were barefoot, while the other half were clad in an assortment of different footwear. It was a strange, almost grotesque picture. Hardly what I'd call cute. Nozomi looked at it. Adults tend to think Jerup is a gross character, but children love it. The book has pictures of flies and cockroaches in it, too. They're drawn with real affection. It's a lovely book, I think. I think because it's written from a child's perspective. Children don't have the prejudices that adults do about insects we usually regard as pests. A true professional, I noted, admiringly with a nod of agreement. Can we borrow this book? Yes, if you live in the ward. If you're looking for anything else, the librarian is over there. Nozomi pointed to the opposite side of the room at the rear. A partition blocked the view, but a sign labeled reference dangled from the ceiling. I thought you were the librarian, I said. Nozomi blushed and waved her hands in the air dismissively. Oh no, I'm still a trainee. I only just graduated from high school, so I need 3 years of practical work experience to become a librarian. I'm still in my first year, so I have a way to go. I must keep trying. Her dazzling youth and those big moist eyes made me quite dizzy. I was moved by her determination. She reminded me of myself and my own considerable effort to find the perfect job and company when I graduated from college. I had ambitions to work in publishing and create books. I was already a Mila fan when I joined Benusha and was thrilled, of course, to be assigned to work on it. 5 years ago, Mila ran a serialized novel by famous author Mizu Kanta that became a popular hit, and I was the one who made it happen. Madame Mizu was 70 at the time, an age that, in the editor-in-chief's opinion, disqualified her from writing for a magazine aimed at young women. He also flatly rejected the idea of a serialized novel in a general interest magazine such as ours. An essay would have been more appropriate, according to him. But I believed in the power of Madame Mizu's writing to our readers. I was convinced that the strong message of hope runs through her historical and literary novels would resonate with women in their 20s. And I was positive that if she chose a setting and style with Mila readers in mind, they would be hooked and buy the magazines every month in anticipation for the next installment. My next strategy was to tackle the managing director, who also poured cold water on the idea. But if she can be persuaded, give it a try, he said, not believing for a moment that such a distinguished author would even consider it. Thus, I began a heated campaign of persuasion. At first, Madame Mizu rejected me on the grounds that a monthly serial was too much hard work at her age. But I was persistent and kept putting my case to her. I pleaded that this was an opportunity to convey the optimism and passion for life that permeated her novels to an audience of young women striving to live full lives. I promised her complete support if she would agree. On my 5th attempt, she finally did. I'm curious to see what kind of story I can produce while working with you, Miss Cicatini, she told me. The title of the serial novel that she subsequently penned was The Pink Plane Tree, about the relationship, neither friendship nor rivalry, between two girls with widely differing characters. It quickly became a centerpiece in Mila, and sales rose. The serial ended up becoming hugely popular and ran for 18 months. At its conclusion, management decided to publish it in a book format as well. Benusha, however, has no fiction department, therefore it became my job to oversee its production as a novel and secure distribution with bookstores. I did all of that on top of my usual editing duties, which made it my busiest period ever since starting at the company. But every day was so fulfilling, I felt alive, trembling with joy. The book went on to win the Bookshelf Prize, a major annual literary award, which naturally everybody at work was jubilant about. It was unheard of for a magazine publisher like Benusha to be in the limelight for literature. The managing director even stopped me in the corridor to hint at a promotion to deputy editor-in-chief. Not long after that, I discovered I was pregnant. I wasn't without qualms at being away from my desk for a time, but was confident in the contribution I had made to the company. I loved my job. I had a relationship of trust with Madame Mizu, and when I returned to work, I planned to forge ahead and achieve even more. For me, the job of editor was about reaping the fruits of a long, careful accumulation of effort. But it was not to be all my experience and effort were for nothing. If I had known I would not be returning to Mila, I would have devoted more of my attention to Fatuba while on maternity leave, instead of filling my head with plans for work. In the precious little time I had to myself while she slept, I would have rested too, or watched Korean dramas, or taken up a hobby instead of wasting time and energy on coming up with new future ideas for Mila and doing all the background research that entailed. I found myself now in a position where I was neither fully satisfied with my job nor with motherhood. Yet I had to spend every moment juggling both. Every day felt like I was merely going around in circles, marking out time, day after day, and going nowhere. Fatuba sat plonked on the floor with the picture book open in front of her. Fushan, shall we go and ask the lady about more fun books? I knew she couldn't hear me, but I was too engrossed in Jerob to even say no. I'll watch Fuchan, Nozomi said. Please, you go and see her. Oh, but Really, it's fine. There's nobody else in here now. Taking her at her word, I put my shoes back on. If I could find a few entertaining picture books for Fatuba here, I might manage to make it through the weekend. The reference corner was separated off by a partition that doubled as a notice board. As I approached, I glanced over to the other side, and my feet came to a sudden stop. Behind the counter sat a large, pale woman of indeterminate age, but if pressed to say, I might have put her in her 50s. She wore a long-sleeved white shirt that was not a garment one would find on the racks of any ordinary clothes shop, had to be either custom-made or a special order from overseas. But with her ivory apron and smooth, unblemished, pure white skin, she reminded me of the Disney Baymax character. The librarian sat behind the counter, looking down solemnly with an expression of deep concentration, engaged in a delicate task of some kind. I approached, curious to know what was occupying her, and saw to my surprise that she was jamming a needle into what looked like a ball of wool resting on a sponge mat. She was felting. I recognized it because we had covered it in a handicraft feature at Mila, although it had not been my project. Stabbing at strands of wool with a felting needle creates the shape. It seemed incongruous for such a large person to be engaged in producing so tiny an object. I stared at her hands with the sense of watching an anime. She appeared to be making some kind of mascot. I recognized the dark orange box next to her as honey dome cookies made by Kir Miyado, an old established company known for its Western-style confectionery. They're delicious. Sorry. A half-moon-shaped cookie with a soft honey-flavored center. We used to give them to artists who contributed to Mila. The thought of the librarian liking them too made me feel a bond with her. The hand stopped moving. When the librarian lifted her head and looked at me, I felt like shrinking. I beg your pardon. An apology wasn't called for, but I withered under the gaze and was edging for my way out when she spoke. What are you looking for? Her voice was flat and low-pitched. Though neither kind nor friendly, it was reassuring nonetheless. I felt gently enfolded by those words that imparted an instant impression of a big heart I felt I could trust, body and soul. What am I looking for? I could give many answers. My future path in life, a way of releasing my frustrations, the patience to raise a child, etc. But where would I find them? And besides, this is not a counseling room. Picture books, I answered simply. The name tag on the librarian's chest read Sirui Komachi. How sweet, small-town Sirui. Miss Komachi, the librarian. Miss Komachi opened the lid of the honey dome box and put away her needle. Apparently it was an empty box used for her sewing tools. Picture books, she repeated evenly. We do have a lot of those. Something suitable for my 2-year-old daughter. She's fond of barefoot Jerob. Miss Komachi swayed and made a rumbling sound. My favorite, she said. It does appear so, though I can't understand what children like, I lamented. She tilted her head slightly to one side and looked at me searchingly. Her hair was round into a tight button, pierced with a hairpin from which a white flower tassel hung. Evidently, she liked the color white. Well, raising a child is one new experience after another, isn't it? You can never really know what it's like until you've been through it. So much turns out to be different than how you imagined. Yes, that's right. I nodded emphatically several times. Here was somebody who seemed to understand. I felt a trust that made me want to reveal my innermost thoughts to her. It's the difference between thinking that Winnie the Pooh is cute and actually living with a bear. Wah! Her burst of Rocious laughter took me by surprise. I wouldn't have thought it would be so loud, nor had I meant it to be funny. I was relieved, though, that it was apparently acceptable to say such things. The complaints rolled off my tongue. I've been in limbo ever since I had a baby, frustrated in not being able to do the things I want to, thinking this isn't how it was supposed to be. Of course, I love my daughter truly, but raising a child is far more difficult than I imagined. Miss Kamachi stopped laughing. Children don't just come into the world, do they? Giving birth was a huge event in your life, wasn't it? Yes, it gave me a great respect for all mothers of the world. Yes, that's right. She gave the faintest nods, then looked straight into my eyes. But this is how I see it. While I do believe that it was hard work for my mother to give birth to me, it also took me every ounce of my own strength to endure the extremely difficult process of being born. After all that time inside my mother's belly, growing into a human being with nobody to guide me, all of a sudden I was thrust into an entirely new and strange environment. Imagine what an awful shock it must have been to come in contact with air for the first time, not knowing where I was. Of course, I've forgotten what that felt like now, but it's why whenever I feel happy or glad about something, I count my blessings and think to myself, now, wasn't that worth all the effort of being born? The truth of these words struck me to the core. I was incapable of saying anything in reply. Miss Kamachi turned toward her computer. You were the same. Being born is probably the most difficult thing we ever have to do. I'm convinced that everything else that comes afterward is nowhere near as hard. If you can survive the ordeal of being born, you can get through anything. Sitting up, ramrod straight, she placed both hands on the keyboard and proceeded to pound the keys with an extraordinary speed and dexterity. Pa, 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 pa. Her fingers moved like a machine. I watched, mesmerized, until she finished up with one last light statico pa. Next minute, the printer sprang into action with a clatter and ejected a piece of paper that she handed to me. It was a table with a list of book titles, with the authors' names and the shelf numbers. I read it through carefully. The first 3 titles were obviously children books. Papan, Welcome Back, Piggy, Welcome Back, Piggy Wig, and Nano Nono. The next, however, was unexpected. Door to the Moon by Yukari Ishii. I knew the name Yukari Ishii because some of my former colleagues in Mila followed her online. She posts daily horoscopes on social media. I don't read horoscopes myself, though. I know that many young women do. In the past, I had actually given some thought to doing a feature on astrology, even if personally I never paid much attention to the monthly horoscope page in Mila. Perhaps Yukari Ishii also wrote picture books, but then I noticed that the book's classification and shelf numbers were different to those on the other titles. Is this about astrology? I asked. Miss Kamachi gave no reply. Instead, she bent over to open the third drawer below the counter. Please, this is for you. It was a round, felted, woolen object. A blue globe with a mottled green and yellow pattern. The Earth? How sweet. Did you make this? My daughter will love it. That's a bonus gift for you. Pardon? A free gift to go with the book. Door to the Moon. I didn't quite understand. Bewilderment must have shown on my face. Taking her needle out of the honey-dome box, Miss Kamachi continued. The good thing about felting is that you can start again halfway through. Even after your project begins to take shape, you can easily change direction along the way if you feel you want to make something different after all. Oh, I see. So it's possible to make something than what you originally set out to do. That's nice. Miss Kamachi said nothing. She looked down at the ball of wool once again and began stabbing at it impassively. Apparently, she was no longer interested in talking to me. It was hard to say anything more, with her body language signaling that she had done her duty. I put the globe in the inner pocket of my bag and headed back to the kids' space. Nozami was reading aloud to Fatuba, so I availed myself of the opportunity to go search for Door to the Moon. It had a striking cover, an intense blue on the front and back, illustrated with a hazy white half-moon. The blue extended even to the page edges, a deep, faraway blue that was neither too somber nor too bright. When I opened it, I found an inky black on the inside end papers, and cream-colored pages of the text that seemed to float in the surrounding blue. I ran my eyes across the text and started to slip into the same mood I did when reading late at night. Flicking through further, the word mother leaped out at me. My hand stopped. In the world of astrology, the moon signifies mothers, wives, incidents from childhood, emotions, the flesh, changes, and so on. The moon signifies mothers and wives? That wasn't what I had led to believe. What about the old adage that a mother is the sun in a family and the reason why a mother is always supposed to be cheerful and smiling? My curiosity piqued. Alright, that is the end of the excerpt that I was gonna read. So definitely pick up this book and read it if that interests you. Even reading it back now, I think I had no idea how each chapter was gonna end in the middle of reading it. Just like the people who are like going to talk to the librarian, like you really have no clue. But it's obvious that each of the people in these chapters are at a turning point of their lives where they want something different in their lives, and that like the character specifically was she was wondering how to balance being a mom and being a career woman, especially like I feel like as a society we believe, and it's very difficult to do both, to care about your career and also have a family. And it was also really hard in that chapter, which I don't think I read those parts, but she also mentions how hard it is to take care of her daughter, have her career, and also have a husband who his career is coming first in comparison to hers. So that's also an added challenge onto that, and how when you have a kid, I feel like a lot of your life has to give up, and you would never trade anything for your child. But it's definitely something that's noted in this world. Alright, I submitted this story. I'm just going to read an excerpt from my story. I submitted it to a contest, the Johnson County Library, but it did not get picked. I wrote it specifically for their prompt, for their humanity prompt. And it's definitely something I want to keep working on, but it's definitely a lot shorter than a full-length book. And I felt like this excerpt I wanted to read from my story, and the excerpt I read from what you're looking for is in the library. I feel like they're different enough from each other while also having an importance to them. But I mean, I feel like I need to preface this with all the work I read that is my own and the work that I've shared that is others. I know my work is not at their level whatsoever. I just like to share my own work. But writing is truly something amazing, and for people who are able to do it, and sometimes I feel like stories are meant to just flow out of people. Like Rick Riordan, his books, like how do you make however many books he's written? And like I feel like those stories are just in his mind and he has to take them out. And as much as I love writing, that's not really how my mind works. But whenever I do think about something for a story, I'm like, okay, I have to write it down, or else it will lose itself in my mind. So like I kind of prefaced before, this is kind of based on my time at the coffee shop I work at. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and start. Cue your shots, steam the milk, and top with whip. A flat white. Arthur heads to the closest coffee shop on a mission, getting a drink for his older brother. His brother is freshly 76, but you would guess he was a young 58 by looking at him. Arthur told his wife not to bother joining him, not only because he doesn't want to burden Sandra with this, but also because he would rather not pay for a drink too, which Sandra would swear she wouldn't want, and Arthur would just insist because he knows his wife. All this hubbub would be messy and take away from what he was there to do. Get something for his brother. As Arthur walks in, he sees a bright and fruity-looking sample cup. "May I?" He has this short, small, purple head making drinks. She motions yes, and he tries it. Yuck. He attempts to hide his dissatisfaction. It's okay if you don't like it, she says sweetly. I know it's not for everyone. Now he feels bad. He forces himself to finish the whole thing, then opens his mouth out of disgust. Then looks apologetically at the purple head, then goes to throw away his drink. Well, maybe you can help me out here, Arthur says. I can try, Purplehead responds curiously. I mostly came here for my brother, but I feel bad if he has to take his coffee alone. I was wondering if you had any recommendations. Nothing like that sample, though, please. Oh, I take it you're a coffee drinker, not a sugar addict? Aggressively nods his head. Well, I'm a sugar addict, but I can give you some suggestions, she says. Do you usually drink just brewed coffee? Arthur nods again. Well, I can make you a flat white and add a little bit of French vanilla to add a kick to it. What other syrups do you have? Pumpkin, pecan, hazelnut, peppermint, cinnamon dolt. She begins. Oh, peppermint. Yes, I like mint. Sweet. At this point, both Arthur and the Purplehead migrated to the computer screen. And what for your brother? I think he likes that caramel macchiato of yours, he says. The caramel macchiato, hot I assume. Yeah. All right, just $12.60 for ya, she says. As Arthur goes to pay, she begins to start on the drinks. Arthur can't help but watch her and how quick she's moving. I don't know how you could go so fast, he says sort of to himself. Yeah, she laughs it off. It's very nice of you to visit your brother. Guess he sent you on the coffee run. She attempts to make the joke and he smiles. Yeah, I'm excited to see him. He pauses. I just hope he can remember me is all. Arthur passes it off as lighthearted, but he can see the barista grow tenser. He worries he said too much now. Usually Sandra chats it up with the barista. Purplehead finishes the drinks and includes sleeves and a drink carrier. She hands it all to him. It's really nice of you to do that, she says, smiling as genuine as a person can. I hope you have a lovely day. Alright, so that was the end of that excerpt. So, obviously, when you write books and you also love to read them, you don't plagiarize, of course, but you take inspiration from the books you read, because the books you really like, you want to try to not recreate, but recreate the feeling you have when you read them. So an idea I kind of like made into my own from what you were looking for in the library is the idea of every time they're seeing the librarian, they're having a different description. So in the excerpt I read, the description was that the librarian looked like Baymax. And in my story, it was like the old man refers to her as Purplehead, and the young girl thinks of her as more of a peer. So I feel like just even doing that shows you people's perception of others and how they perceive different people, and it's different for everyone. Like, an old guy isn't gonna think the same things that a middle-aged woman thinks, or stuff like that. So I feel like it's important, and it's a good way it's a good way to show a distinction of characters when you're doing that. I'm still a little bummed that one didn't win the contest. I was really proud of it, but I understand why it might still feel juvenile to some people. It just sucks because they didn't give me feedback. But it's one of the most recent things I've written. So I feel like in a few years, like I do with most of my work, I'll look back on it and be like, that was not good, or this is what I'm going to do differently. But probably still work on it. I mean, I probably have so many stories from the cafe. And obviously, it's very short in comparison to Mishiga Aoyama's book, the book we just read. I'm going to apologize for how I pronounce the Japanese names. I'm very sorry. I did it to the best of my ability, but I understand that I probably said them wrong, and I'm sorry. Alright, so I think that is the end of the episode then. Please, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I really hope you guys all have a lovely day. And I'm sorry if I'm breathing too much into this microphone. My nose keeps getting clogged. So if I sound nasally, that is why. But I am done yapping at ya, so hope you have a good day and thank you